Hey, my name's Shanshan. I do art on shanshan.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review Spider-Man Far From Home. So this is the second new version of Spider-Man from the Avengers world. So this Spider-Man was originally introduced in one of the Avengers, was in, I believe, his own movie, and he was also in the last Avengers. So this is kind of the third, fourth time you've seen this Spider-Man, but it's only his second full movie. It has Tom Holland as Spider-Man, Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, Zendaya as Mary Jane, Jacob Batalon as Ned Leeds, sidekick of Peter Parker. So the story is, Peter Parker, he just wants to relax from the last Avenger film, but battle, if this is the real world. And he just kind of wants to relax and be a normal kid. And there's this big school trip to go to Europe. Nick Fury keeps blowing up his phone. He's like, I don't want to deal with this. And what happened is Nick Fury has run into this kind of hurricane force in Mexico. He sees this guy Mysterio try to fight it, and then Spider-Man kind of jumps into the mix and they fight it together and like, oh, this is kind of cool. They team up and say, hey, let's go on to the next. There's a gang of these elementals from a different universe. I'm from a different universe. And there's 4 different elementals. So they get the wind elemental, next one is fire, right? And the fire guy keeps getting bigger and bigger as he touches all this metal, and they're battling, I think, in Venice. And at this point, they team together, and then Spider-Man's like, oh, I'm done with this. Let me just give you these glasses. He's got these special glasses from Tony Stark, Iron Man, and they're Iron Man's secret satellite over observation with military hardware and stuff. So it's really helpful for Spider-Man. Somebody's like, oh, this is really cool, but I just don't want all this. This is too much. Mysterio approaching, he's like, I'll just give it to Mysterio. It seems like a good guy. He wants to do the superhero stuff more than me. I'm just kind of want to be chill and just be the neighborhood Spider-Man. I don't want to be like the world globetrotter. And he's trying to not to be caught by his friends, right? Because people have only cited Spider-Man in New York. They've never seen him outside of New York, except for the Avengers films, right? So it has kind of this nice plot development, and then there's a twist in the story, and then that kind of follows out as Mysterio turns out to be a bad guy instead of the good guy. So it's kind of a really nice play. Mysterio has all these special drones that kind of create all these illusions, so it makes it really hard to spot what's reality and what's not for Spider-Man, and he's not really having much success with the Spidey sense, which they're calling it the Peter Tinkle. That's kind of terrible, but that's what they're calling it instead of Spider Sense. Yeah, I like the story. It's pretty fun. It's a little bit long, 2 hours, 9 minutes, but these kind of Marvel long movies, especially there's kind of this long introduction. So it has a kind of nice act 1. He's kind of, going to Europe, trying to forget about what happened in the last Avengers film. Act 2, they have these monsters. He's like, all right, I'll jump in when I can, but I really don't want to take it. And then Act 3, he kind of has to fight Mysterio. So it has a really good Act 1, 2, and 3. Good story. The really fun part is they have after credit scenes. They don't have Stan Lee. Stan Lee unfortunately passed last year, so they just couldn't use him. Or they chose tastefully not to use him. But it would have been cool to see him if they had footage of Stan Lee. But yeah, they have 2 plot twists in the after credits. You're like, oh my god, dude, because they're just kind of fun. They're not necessary to the story to work by itself, but they really add a really extra dimension as far as what happens with Peter Parker's identity. And this is kind of what happens as well with kind of in the comic books with Mysterio. The interesting point is Mysterio in the comic books, he was kind of the stunt guy, and then he had this grudge against Spider-Man for some reason, and he robs some banks, and then he tries to frame Spider-Man, and then he saves Spider-Man and he gets a confession out of Spider-Man. This is kind of where he is in the comic books. And here what they've done is he's done like an ex-employee of Tony Stark, so he has like this really like, I want to get, this guy stole my inventions, and so that has a really good motivation, I think, for Mysterio and his background. As well as where they leave it a little bit open-ended so they can go with that again. They'll probably use a different plot, but, the bad guys kind of slip away in a way. They did borrow a little bit, I think, from Spider into the multiverse as far as kind of the swings and the better action sequences for swinging. It's not as cool as Into the Spider-Verse. I think that was such a cool way they shot that film was amazing because they mixed comic book look with animation look versus real-life footage, and they kind of had all 3 of those going at the same time, and it was just really mind-blowing what they did. This one, they kind of revert to the classic Avengers look, where it's as if it's in reality and it's all live action, and there's no comic book look. Obviously it's a comic book, but they shoot it as if it's in real life, which is fine. But that Into the Multiverse is just amazing, and I think they should have just maybe gone from there. But I think because this is part of kind of the Avengers universe, they wanted to kind of keep it straight-laced, so to say. But I did like them Into the Multiverse a lot better as far as new way of cutting a film. A little bit too many Spider-Mans, but it was just amazing what they did with that film. I think they got a really new audience with that. A lot of minorities were attracted to that because they had like a black Spider-Man for the first time. And this one, they go back to the same white guy. But, whatever. The other thing, if you compare this, say, to the earlier, there was the Spider-Man in 2000 that came out with Tobey Maguire. I really didn't like Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. I think he's okay once you put the mask on. It doesn't matter who plays it. Just has to be muscular, and Tobey Maguire looked built, so he looked like Spider-Man and with the suit on, but then with the suit off, he looks way too pimply, way too geeky. Not geeky, but just in a bad way, kind of boggly-eyed, and he just didn't look like Peter Parker I had from this comic book for me. So this guy, the newer guy, what's this guy's name? Tom Holland, I get to feel like it's much more like Spider-Man. He's lean and mean, but he's still a teen, he still looks very young, but he doesn't look super dorky like Tobey Maguire just looked like a dork. And this guy doesn't look like a dork. He looks like he's a bumbling teenager, which is how Spider-Man's played, but he's, he's still smart. It just looks more like what I would think of Peter Parker. The weird thing is the Mary Jane, the new one is Zendaya. I don't think she's as good as the original one with Kirsten Dunst. I thought she played a much more believable Mary Jane as far as kind of the boyfriend pseudo. It was more like she was gonna be matched up with someone else, and in this one they have that a little bit, but Zendaya is really young, at the same age as this kid, and she looks like a teen, so that's good, but just not as good looking. So I just didn't find her as attractive, and she has more worldly. She doesn't look like the Mary Jane from the comic books, and the Mary Jane from the comic book is very white, kind of country girl in a way, and they played that in the first one with Kirsten Dunst. She kind of has that country look. This one has more of an urban look, which is fine, but she's not as good looking or as attractive. So that's the only thing I can say about those. Worse Spider-Man, better Mary Jane, but every film's going to have its differences on who plays which characters, right? Overall, I think I'd recommend the film. It's really fun. It's definitely sellout, so you definitely have to book it ahead of time. I booked it like 2-3 days in advance, and it was selling out the complete theater in the middle of the day. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.